station, 30 feet below City Hall. Mayor George B. McClellan, son of the famous Civil War general, officially opened the first subway in New York, recklessly throttling the first train up to full speed and racing uptown underground, towards a sleepy district 4 miles to the north, where the New York Times was just completing its brand new 22-story headquarters, at the foot of an hourglass-shaped crossroads that the city had renamed Times Square in the paper's honor. The most famous, vibrant, and thrilling urban district on earth roared into life just as the forces that would soon send New York City itself soaring skyward converged on the island of Manhattan, culmination of the most explosive century of growth and change in the city's history. As the center of New York surged up the island of Manhattan, following the path of a Native American trail that the Dutch settlers had called Breedway or Broadway. From the stock markets of Wall Street to the raucous newspapers across from City Hall, up to the giant department stores on Madison Square, where by 1876 passers-by stared up in wonder at the giant arm of an unfinished Statue of Liberty, still looking for funds and something to stand on. But it was in the next 3 decades that New York City would finish coming into its own on a spectacular scale, as millions upon millions of immigrants poured through the harbor and onto the streets of a city that by 1882 had become the first on Earth to be lit by electricity. And that as the clock struck midnight on December 31st, 1898, dramatically expanded its borders literally overnight to encompass a vast 5-borough metropolis, connected to itself by 1904 by what would become the largest subway system in the world. Its hundreds of miles of track all inexorably converging at the intersection of Broadway and 42nd Street, in what was now called Times Square. On New Year's Eve that same year, confirming its status as the new throbbing heart of the greatest city in America, immense crowds gathered in Times Square for the first time, for a publicity stunt dreamed up by the publishers of the New York Times, counting down the seconds to the stroke of midnight. From then on, New Yorkers, and soon much of the rest of the world, would ring in the new year with a delirious celebration in Times Square. And it was only the beginning. In the years to come, the astonishing mix of creative energies in New York, black and white, immigrant and native-born, Jewish, Italian, Irish, African-American, and Anglo-Saxon, would burst into glorious expression as a new and distinctively American kind of culture, brash and vital, electric and pulsing, now began to come into its own.
I found myself what is called Times Square. I'm saying hello to Broadway.
Just as New York City itself was lifting straight up into the skies, becoming the world headquarters of a new kind of modern mass culture, consecrated to everything air-minded and upwardly mobile, air travel, skyscrapers, motion pictures, the media, high fashion, and before long radio. A thrilling city of spectacle, fantasy, movement, and dreams, whose very heart and soul was based in Times Square. By 1929, no fewer than 66 Broadway theaters, along with hundreds of nightclubs, vaudeville houses, and movie palaces, were drawing in 250,000 people each and every night to a district now bathed in the glow of 1 million incandescent lights and known around the world as the Great White Way. Now the greatest incubator of talent in human history and the birthplace of one of America's greatest contributions to world culture, the Broadway musical.
You're going out a youngster, but you've got to come back a star.
By 1940, Times Square had become the first place in the world where people gathered to get news in real time, as it was happening on the never-ending electric zipper that coursed around the Times Tower. On August 14th, 1945, more than 2 million people gathered in Times Square to learn that 6 long years of World War had finally come to an end. ushering in an era of American preeminence as never before, making New York and Times Square itself the crossroads of the world, as one great musical after another filled the stages of Broadway and captured the hearts of millions.
One look at us and they charge twice.
They can't be trotting down to Times Square to pick out the merchandise.
I'm walking here! I'm walking here!
But by the late 1960s, New York and cities everywhere had entered a dark period of decay and decline. As the automobile drew people out of the city to the suburbs, and as a new medium, television, brought the once public world of entertainment into private living rooms everywhere, until by 1975, the city and its famous crossroads seemed on the verge of total collapse. But the city didn't collapse, and on the contrary came roaring back, thanks in large part to the astonishing tide of newcomers who in the final decades of the 20th century surged into the city from around the world, drawn by the beacon of opportunity that New York still stood for. By the 1990s, as crime rates plummeted and the city rose again, the old theaters on 42nd Street were refurbished and restored, and new ones sprang up, and Broadway itself came roaring back, with one triumphant hit after another. A resilience that would prove all the more crucial to the city and to peoples around the world at times of greatest challenge. Today, Times Square, sometimes dismissed by New Yorkers themselves as too full of tourists, is fulfilling its promise as the crossroads of the world as never before. A place at once of destination and homecoming for the entire planet. Still the beating heart of one of the most thrilling cities on earth, a city of yearning and aspiration and dreams.